Hello and welcome back to What the Fuck is SRE? I'm Jen Riggins, your Making Shit Up as I Go host. And as I make up, I've been asking for your suggestions for the imp's name over there. And as I FaceTime my kid before bed, he decided that, oh, look, you have a dragon and his little fire friend. So I think little fire friend is a nice way to look at the hackers and the high thresholds and toil as a friendly adversary that we can take on. So that is great. And I just wanted to do a roll call real quick to our awesome sponsors that are allowing these great conversations, important conversations to happen and for y'all to attend. We have Blameless, Stormfront, Teleport, Cortex, Shoreline, Lightstep, PagerDuty, Fire Hydrant, and Rootly. And of course, to our organizers, Container Solutions, thank you all for joining and for supporting this conversation. And now I just want to call to the stage our lovely panelists. As you probably saw, we are talking about the number 9. Today is sponsored by the number 9 and the letters W, T, and F and SRE. Like the UN, it probably has too many acronyms, which is already a gatekeeping step in the world. So I'm just going to go around for what my visualization is and ask each of you to introduce yourselves and then to give a one-liner of what you define as site reliability engineering. And I think we can all suggest respectfully that Jamie avoided the question at the beginning of the conference. So Nathan, you go first.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Nathan Harvey. I'm a developer advocate at Google Cloud. And so I go and I help customers understand and put into practice all of the SRE principles and practices and some other things as well. So in one line, what do I think SRE is? I think it is getting the entire organization rallying around serving the customer and meeting the promises that we make to them. That's what SRE is.
Serving the customer and meeting promises made.
Yes.
Promise, interesting contract, maybe more than promise, but okay, we'll keep talking about that. Hannah, you go next. Please introduce yourself and give us your definition of SRE.
Hi, folks. My name is Hannah Foxwell. I am Director of Platform Services at VMware Tanzu. My definition of SRE, you've put me on the spot here. I think it's a set of practices and methodologies that allow us to have better conversations about reliability and to make informed decisions about how to improve reliability of our solutions.
Okay, better conversations that lead to informed decisions. Okay, Abby, you're next, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Abby. I am an SRE based in London. And while I agree with all of these, I think my lens is I come from the software testing background. And so one thing I would add to the conversation is that I think this is a way of talking about quality just at the system level and at thinking about things even from like third-party dependencies and at scale. So that's my kind of angle.
And please, Anurag, go last, please.
Hi. So my name's Anurag. I'm the founder and CEO of Shoreline.io. And our goal is to make on-calls suck less, mostly by reducing incidents through automation. SRE for me is a set of practices and principles basically on making systems more reliable through applying an engineering mindset.
Okay, then I ask a follow-up question to you. How do you define reliability?
Reliability for me is the notion of ensuring that systems fail. All systems fail. The question is, how do you minimize the impact of that as visible to your customers?
Okay, fair enough. I'm taking copious notes. We have promise delivery, or maybe delivering on contract, conversations around decision-making, conversations around quality at the system level, and practices and principles around making things more reliable. What I hear is interesting. No one actually mentioned engineering. It was much more about, not directly, the coding or automation, things like that. What I noted is that it was much more than anything else about a conversation and opening a discussion. And I think that leads to an interesting question then. Who is having that discussion and where should the SRE team reside? And who should be involved in that discussion? Don't all jump in at once.
I mean, I'll jump in because I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to this question. And I think people get really bogged down in org design. And so many of the principles and practices around SRE can be implemented if you're a tiny startup or an enormous or enterprise organization. I think if you are going to dedicate people to SRE, I think it's really important you give them a clear mission. Are you building an enabling function that teaches others how to do it well? Or are you building an engineering function that's going to be hands-on and creating things that serve others, like a platform team kind of model? Or are you rebranding your ops team, as has happened in so many places? And I think if you do go that route and you do say, hey, ops, you're now SRE, well, let's combine that with a change in remit and more autonomy to do the things that they've probably been wanting to do for a long time, to invest in the reliability of the systems that they support. So I think to summarize, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think you need to look at the problems that you're solving in your own organization and figure out how some of these SRE practices can be implemented and who are the right people to go ahead and do that. And if that requires dedicated SRE people whose only job is this, then that's great. But not everyone has that luxury.
Abby, which team are you on?
I am on more of a kind of platform engineering style team right now. And so seated within engineering. And I think that's one of the conversations is, who do you report up into and how do those structures occur? And I think what's really nice is that for us, there's a lot of connection between kind of customer service as well as the engineering. So we are in kind of Slack channels supporting our customers as we go. So we're aware of those needs, and our engineering teams are the first port of call for that. So I think that allows us to be connected to what is needed by our customers, and therefore what do we need to be able to provide.
And then that team is technically its own team. It's not an SRE embedded in engineering teams. It's not a cross-functional. Has anyone worked in that pattern, or more the Google route, which is a separate entity?
So I certainly worked in the AWS route, and I spent 8 years at AWS running database and analytics. We had a strong belief there that everybody should do on-call or be part of an escalation chain. And I think the strength of that is that you avoid having, like taking this work and isolating the pain onto a fractional portion of your workforce. So I think that's really valuable. Now, the fact is you're going to need people who have expertise in this, just as you have people who have expertise in quality or security or so forth. And so that is where people may have more of the conversation. But I've, as part of selling on Shoreline, I've talked to SREs where they say, oh, we don't have any incidents. And then I'll ask, how has your team grown over the past year? Oh, it's tripled. Now, for me, there's a sign there where, clearly someone who's got this architectural role, so to speak, isn't feeling the pain. But that doesn't mean there isn't pain. And I think that, that just simple awareness about what your customers see is truly important.
I mean, incidences are happening. IBM found that what is the number they said in their most recent report? 287 days for respondents in their survey to actually identify that they've been breached on their latest data breach. So incidents are happening. You just might not know what's causing it or what is happening.
Or if you're having enough pain, maybe you're just dialing the alarm threshold so that to what is acceptable for the, your team's pain as opposed to your customer's pain.
So you only hit the oh fuck moments, not the oh shit moments.
There you go.
And we need to hit them all, and then your team actually grows stagnant because you're no longer learning. Since 99999 is in the title of this panel, for those that don't know, what are the nines we were talking about here, and what is the real difference? If you want to do the math for me, in the Spanish way, soy de letras is much more elegant than I suck at math. But how much more is that extra 9, the 99.99 versus 99.999 in terms of pressure and systems resilience? People are doing math in their heads right now. I like it. Nobody brought
that
up.
I can answer. So I mean, 99.99 is 4.4 minutes of downtime a month. A 5 nines would be a tenth of that, or 44 seconds of downtime a month, right? Give or take. I might have done that wrong, but roughly speaking, I think that both of those thresholds are ones where you cannot have human involvement anymore. So that for me is kind of the key to that point. You need self-healing infrastructure. And one of the flaws, I think, in how people use those nines is that they talk about, like their fleet availability. Now, my customer doesn't care about my fleet availability. They care about their availability. Like if I call my local utility company and say the power's out at my house, and they tell me that they've got 5 nines power availability in the state of California, the power is still out at my house. And at the end of the day, if we're running services, we're running utilities, and the only, the most important thing is just, as we talk about, keeping the lights on, right? And so I think 4 or 5 nines on a per customer basis is truly challenging.
Per customer. Okay, Nathan.
I also think that your customers might not notice the difference between 4 and 5 nines. It really depends on what you're doing. It also really depends on what you're trying to do, and that's sort of what I described as the definition. What promises have you made to your customers? What do they expect? What we want to do is keep our customers happy enough that they keep using our service. And the truth, of course, is that over time, what keeps them happy enough changes. So we can't just, today ship something that meets 1 9 or 90% reliability and expect maybe our customers are happy with that today, but in 2 years' time, they're going to expect more from us, or they're going to go somewhere else. And so I think it's really important to remember that each one of those nines that we incrementally add to the number is an exponential investment in improving that reliability. I think it's also important to remember that reliability is more than just availability, although we tend to think about availability and reliability as being the same thing. I think that availability is one component of reliability, or one aspect.
Okay. What other components are there?
Well, you might have latency, for example. Oh, this thing is up and it's available, and it is really slow. Like, that's not great. We don't want that. We need to have quick responses, or responses in the time that we expect. And you also can think about like degrading your services. Let's say you try to do a transaction. Maybe you've gotten into a car collision and you want to file a claim with your auto insurance company. So you pull out your phone and you do the thing. And maybe that goes in, but you don't immediately get the claim number. How fast do you need that claim number back, right? Maybe for the insurance company, something failed and they ended up having to do some manual processing for that. As a customer, do I care about that? As long as I'm getting some response at a relatively timely fashion, right? Maybe not immediate microsecond response. Within the day, here's your claim number and we've got you. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And definitely I've learned through, actually I'll share in the chat an article I wrote about Liz Fung Jones' talk. Good follow-up after Charities, Honeycomb in the House. She was talking about how an SLO isn't the same, this 9999, dizzy, isn't the same for all services. Some services are super important. Some are not. Mm-hmm. You need to have these, again, it brings it back to conversations, but who are involved in these conversations? Are they happening? So Abby, as our SRE on here, and as a really important topic I know we both share, is the idea of SRE mental health. So especially when we're working in remote first environments during a pandemic, the pandemic isn't over just because you're over it, and other stressful situations around the world that are happening, including we've all had teammates in Ukraine. How do you care about your peers and your own mental health and reduce the risk of burnout while also like 99999?
Yeah, I mean, the practices around SRE should, in theory, be helpful here, right? The practices around trying to automate and set resilient services for ourselves should mean that we aren't on fire at all times. This is an ideal world, and I know that, and we all live in a world where there are incidents and everything else. And so I think the thing I've noticed the most as my career has progressed is around leadership needing to show taking this seriously. So there's lots of talk of like work reasonable hours. Don't, if you're in the middle of an incident, get up and go get food and take a walk outside if it's a long incident, those kinds of things. But what's important is that you see people who are kind of more senior to you doing those things so that you know that you're really allowed to do them. And so I think as someone who's grown through the years, that's something I try and do now, despite it being challenging sometimes to have to turn off the computer and walk away so that other people can feel the ability to do that as well.
So I guess it's important to, especially in a remote environment, to over communicate that you're doing that and why, and you should do it too.
Yeah, I think actually not responding to messages, actually being offline when you say you're going to be, and when you come back, come on back, Nathan, when you feel better. And when you come back, not coming back with an answer that you clearly were working the entire time you were offline, right? Like I think it's being true to yourself that you are actually taking a break, because I think people can feel it when you're not. And that hidden pressure is the thing I think that really eats away at people is, should I be working? Everyone else seems to be working at all times. I think I need to now too. But it's not spoken about. That's the hardest part, going over and above because we have a big deadline this week. Okay, that happens once in a while, but it's that everyday churn of feeling that pressure to work long hours or not take breaks that I think is really hard.
This goes full circle to the opening keynote with Holly Cummings. But how do you measure that psychological safety? How often are, especially SRE or anyone that's on call, how often are people actually checking in and knowing how many hours? Are people actually using Slack or the tools that could measure time without being presenteeism, Big Brother watching and clocking people, but you could get an idea of how many hours someone's working without punishing them for it? How do you know? Ideally, it doesn't make you a good manager if you don't know how you're psychologically safe your team is, but let's be real. How do they learn to know and check on their SREs?
I think you can look at signals.
Nathan, then.
Sorry, Nathan. No, I was just going to say that like retrospectives are like, it's just a really simple answer, but I think having a regular cadence where people voice their concerns in a safe environment, and where you can have those type of conversations, outside of a team meeting, outside of normal work. It's just like, actually, how are things going generally? I use retrospectives to keep a sort of finger on the pulse of, how the team are feeling. And, you do get that feedback. And especially over time, as you get to know people, the things that come up as recurring topics in your team retrospectives tell you a lot about how sustainable their work is at the moment. And if people are skipping retrospectives, that's an even greater sign.
And I think a good signal for burnout and measuring burnout is asking folks about what's your ability to disconnect from work, and what are you doing without prying? Like, are you enjoying your time disconnected from work? Maybe is a good question to ask. I don't care what you're doing, you're disconnected from work. It's none of my business really. But understanding whether or not they are disconnecting from work, and if they feel like they can disconnect from work. And I want to circle back to a thing that Abby said about sort of leadership as well. We talk about these 9s and we know that they're super expensive. Well, we also, I've seen so many leaders say, hey, let's shoot for, 4 9s. I mean, we want 100, but 4 9s is good. Every time they say, I mean, we want 100, what they're doing is saying, when you turn up for work tomorrow, you're going to fail. You're going to let me down.
Or you're not going to innovate.
Right. So you can't innovate, or you show up and you're a failure. You're not meeting my expectations. And that, who wants to work in that way, where you show up and based on the numbers, based on that leader's perception, you're going to fail. That's a great way to drive burnout. Don't do that.
But then again, I just keep coming back to, if you have an embedded SRE versus a SRE external, this may be an assumption that I'm making, but we all make them. By having the team external, do they not get more pressure because there's like this lack of knowledge, or there's this degree of separation where, yes, the manager then should be pushing back on what they accept, versus on a team, is there more an involvement that everyone is on call, except as I learned from Charity, even before I had a kid, not people with newborns. They have something else waking them up at night. Don't let them be on call. But this idea that if you have this degree of separation in this like advisory role, could it lead to more burnout because people aren't aware of everything they're doing?
I think it does. I think you're exactly right. And basically by separating the teams, you reduce the visibility, you reduce the number of hands sharing the work, and you reduce the number of people who potentially are motivated to care. So I think for that reason, it helps a great deal. I'll give you the counter argument, which I hear from SREs, which is that I don't trust these other guys to do the on-call. It's just they're going to screw it up, and then it's going to create a bigger problem for me to deal with in an escalation. So you have to balance these things, but I don't think, like separating it at an org structure level actually solves anything.
Yeah, my experience when people have that lack of trust is it's maybe leaning towards that rebranding of the ops team side of things. But one thing I'm hearing as kind of an underlying idea here is that SREs are the on-call people. And either they're the on-call people within a team, or they're the on-call people outside of a team. And I don't know if I'm just hearing that as an assumption wrongly, or if that is how we're all speaking about it. But, I mentioned that I'm on kind of a separate team within engineering, and my title is SRE, but actually I'm not on call currently, right this minute. And it's all the software, it's across engineering that's on call. We are the team that has specialisms that can help support teams in different ways, but it doesn't, having the title software engineer, having the title SRE doesn't change whether or not you can benefit from learning and supporting your software in production.
So when you're on call, it's a cross-functional team, because there may be an SRE, an engineer, an ops person, so you structure your on-call rotation based on that cross-functionality, not necessarily that they're on the same team all the time, but for on-call they have to be, or they should be.
I think that depends on your scale a little bit, right? So right now I'm at quite a small startup, and so what we can have escalation paths rather than multiple people on kind of first level on call. And I think you're going to have, as the ecosystem grows, as the number of people who can take that on grows, you can talk about having multiple people. But right now we kind of try and keep everybody aware of each other's technology stacks. And we also understand there's limitations to that. And that's why we have escalation paths to the different areas in case someone who's on call does need support from someone who might have a different specialty than them. So
Thank y'all. I want to reflect some of the comments from the audience. One person said, I remember reading about a company having a food commander role in their incident response process. People need food to function after all. I think the way Honeycomb, I know, does it is a bit more scalable for an international team. But basically, if you're fighting a fire and you need to feed your family. Okay, order takeout for the whole family on the company. That's simple. Feeding people is something that you have to remind people to do. Just like you said, Abby, you have to proactively show the example of breaks. And then another attendee said that feeling when you look over the shoulder of a coworker who did not fix a bug over an unplanned night shift and you fixed it together 10 minutes the next morning. Maybe you shouldn't be fixing bugs on call. Maybe that's unless they are the reason for downtime. Just a reminder to those joining us live, feel free to add your questions in the Q&A. If you can't have a conversation with the 99.999 manager, that's a problem. We've definitely had a lot of people like, whoa, the type of manager that would say, well, really, we want 100% uptime, 100% reliability are not good managers. And someone said that's a hot take. Well, yeah, that's why we're a firefighter team. A question I have is, so whether you're just getting started with SRE, or maybe you've had it in name only, excuse me, where do you start? Like, what is the first thing you need? Is observability, is a development process, deployment process, is it scalability, resiliency? Yes, all of these are important, but how do you get started with SRE?
I'd say observability, simply because if you don't know what's going on, you're sure as heck not going to fix anything. So, yeah, simple answer.
I'll say, I have bad news for you. Something is broken right now. So the place to start with SRE is once you've restored that thing that's broken and it's working again, go and learn from that and let that start to guide how you're going to start with SRE. And then coupling that, I would say the other place really to start is to identify your toil, the toil that you have in your system, and start wearing down that toil, either by eliminating the thing that you're doing that is toilsome, not automating it, eliminating it. First, just get rid of it. If you can't get rid of it, if it really is required, then automate it and use that new capacity that you have through eliminating that toil, use that to focus more on more reliable things like observability, like monitoring, etc.
Hannah, agree or disagree?
No, I'm nodding violently because I was going to say exactly the same thing. Go where the pain is. Go where the pain is, and that's going to look different depending on your situation. But if there is one service that's waking up your on-call every single night, go there. If you've got issues with too many tickets, too many manual interactions with your system, then go there, like you said, like solve for that problem. But it's going to be about figuring out where the pain is, and solving for that first.
That's interesting because it's kind of the opposite of most app modernization plans, because most app modernization is to go for the low-hanging fruit, go for the things that are easy, or you're building Greenfield to move to the cloud first. But what you're saying is go for the hardest problem first to fix it, the thing that's causing, I guess, ideally your customers the most pain, but if we're talking about burnout, your employees the most pain as well. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I guess it's the same. It's the same reasoning behind it, though, isn't it? It's like, where can I have the highest impact at the lowest cost? So in SRE, that is the thing that's taking your time. Your time is precious. And perhaps in app modernization, it's all of that low-hanging fruit that you talked about. Maybe it's all of the things that we can very easily get done, which allows us the kind of capacity to then attack those harder problems later. So I think it's the same trade-off in a different context. It's all about how you can have the most impact as quickly as possible.
I think this all circles back around to that idea of observability. If we widen what we're talking about when we say observability, if we're saying observability is monitoring of our services and our HTTP requests and so forth, then that's one angle on it. But if we talk about needing to be able to actually know where that pain lives, that is a part of organizational observability. I think that's what you're saying, Hannah. And it's I find so often that there's teams that look like they have no incidents, but when you kind of start poking around, it's because they always talk about it in direct messages and there's no kind of public visibility of it. And there's kind of fear around that, or potentially much less sinister. There's a lack of awareness that that is an incident that is that could benefit from some formality to support. So yeah, I think what you're saying is get visibility into where your biggest pain is and then start tackling that as quickly as possible. And I definitely would agree with that.
Yeah, invest in ways to get faster, higher fidelity feedback. And then when you're done when you get that, do that again and get better and better and better and faster feedback. And make sure, and this I think is another recurring theme here, make sure that feedback makes it the full circle, right? When we talk about having an SRE team, the biggest challenge with that is you start hearing phrases like, that's not my job, or that's not your job. The SREs have specialty, but reliability is our job, all of our job.
I like the thing you said, Nathan, about continuous improvement in different words. One of the things I used to do at AWS was every week, every service, we'd look at the tickets that came in and find just one, that we were going to extinguish forever through automation. You do that for a year, in a continuous way, you'll get 50, 60% better. And, that matters. So, I think that kind of discipline matters the same way it does for QA, same way it does for everything else.
Okay. Thank y'all. Jason, a question from the audience. Thank you for that. Is there a difference between being SRE in a new organization or an existing organization that transitioned from fighting fires and having years of remediation and repair work versus being involved in Greenfield and being able to negotiate those service objectives? And I guess also SRE in more of a monolithic traditional architecture and traditional sector versus cloud native, shiny. So in y'all's experience, what's the difference, if there is any?
I love a Greenfield because, the best thing about a Greenfield is we can do it right this time. Oh, except we won't. The only thing that's right is that we continuously learn. And as was just mentioned, we practice continuous improvement. So I think that we have some false sense of security in a Greenfield, perhaps, that we're going to do it right this time. I can guarantee you're not. But you're going to learn better this time, maybe.
Okay.
It's really a question of tech debt, right? Like how much, how bad is the situation that you're going into? I mean, learning a lot is nice, but getting some sleep is also nice,
For sure.
Is it that SRE in more traditional or older organizations, is SRE coming in when it's really that bad and it's just a recipe for burnout?
Usually people in brownfield applications, people are investing in it because things are really bad and they want a better way. But the question is, are they willing to spread that load across everyone?
It's very interesting that I think the financial sector, and this is just in my external observer role, seems to be faster than other traditional organizations because of how rapidly fintech is able to compete, that they're like, oh, we really do need to now hit these requirements because people are finally changing banks and things.
I think with this stuff, you need kind of courage from leadership, whether it's a newer Greenfield organization or a longer, more tech debt, whatever you want to call it, kind of organization. Because if you're in a situation where you're fighting fires every day, all day, you need courage from leadership to stand there and say, we're going to change our expectations, or we're going to invest in this and move people and time and investment there. And if you're in a kind of more Greenfield, newer organization, you still need courage from leadership to talk about the fact that it's about shipping things that we know can stand up to the expectations of our users at not just today, but maybe in the right horizon. Is it in the next few months? Is it in the next few years? It depends on where you're at. And I think in both cases, it does take that courage to invest in that. but how you invest in it looks quite different depending on if you're talking about a 20-year-old tech or yesterday written tech. So,
or 200-year-old company.
Yeah.
We have a comment from the audience that I think leads to another spontaneous question from me. None of this matters if your budget is canned after a year because things will get worse before they get better. Do you agree that when implementing true SRE, things get worse before it gets better? And what is something that can be done to ameliorate that?
I'm just going to say it may not be actually worse. It might just be that you now have visibility and data to demonstrate what your actual reliability is. And people are for the first time really looking at the scope of and the challenge that's ahead of them. I definitely, I've worked with organizations where they proclaimed 100% availability, apart from, of course, those pre-negotiated outages, because those don't count. And of course, your users only care about the outages that you didn't negotiate. So I think it's definitely a mindset change. And I don't know whether that was the situation that led to the comment, or whether there was another reason that it got worse. But I've definitely seen that. I've definitely seen the increased transparency create a perceived problem in reliability.
Yeah, I'd say look, this is a hard job, and the work doesn't reduce just because there are fewer hands to do it. The average tenure of an SRE in the industry is about 18 months.
That sounds about right.
And so, people leave, people move around, the toil gets high, everyone's got options, but it gets tough. And that, I think, is the core challenge, which, gets back to what the thing Abby was saying about courageous leadership. Like Microsoft would do this thing where, bugs get too high, you pull an andon cord, and you are not going to ship a feature again until things are better. And that's a pretty tough, bright line. But, there are times you need to do things like that. Yeah, I understand what the person in the comments was saying, because, it's not an easy job. And there are times that it can be a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
For no fault of your own.
I was violently nodding to you, Hannah, but in order to not just completely be like everything she said and that's all, I would say that sometimes things can also get worse because putting automation towards things can create problems. Like, this is just more software, and more software has more bugs. And now all of a sudden you're automating not just how you're building your Docker images or something, but you're also automating how you're changing your DNS. It's always DNS, and these can have very far reaching impacts when you're talking about some of these reliability kind of automated recovery aspects. And so I think it's fair to say it does actually get worse sometimes, not just, but I agree that it's often that people just weren't aware of how bad it was. And that's just part of awareness to software engineering, right?
And through automation, we can get faster, more consistent incidents. It's awesome, right?
Okay, and just to echo back what I don't know who said, learning a lot is nice. Getting some sleep is also nice. Sean in the chat had said that on the topic of burnout, and so he self-defined as sleep deprivation. One of the anti-patterns I've seen almost everywhere over the years is too much alerting. It pays dividends to figure out what's noise and can wait versus what's urgent and addressed. So as we are winding down, just really quickly, if each of you can give me one way you've done self-care or made sure your team enabled your team for self-care in this role.
I think an example from one of my past roles was around changing out who's on call, no matter what the schedule is. If someone's had a bad couple days, saying, it's not asking them, is it okay if we, are you okay? Do you want help? It's more saying, you've had a wake up call 2 nights in a row. We're going to swap you out. And that depends on what your your normal is. That wasn't normal for us. And so for us, that was abnormal and terrible. And so we felt like that person needed a bit of a break and to be able to sleep without worry for the next few nights. So.
And few nights, because sometimes it'll take a couple nights to get back into that sleep routine.
Absolutely.
What about anyone else?
That's the same answer I was going to give, that you can't wait for people to ask for help. You have to provide them help. And you do that by having that idea of what normal looks like and basically taking care of people when it's abnormal. Or their situation outside of work, for example, a new baby or whatever is abnormal.
COVID.
It's COVID, although we were all suffering.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
I think,
yeah. Go.
I was just going to say, acknowledging when people have gone really above and beyond, saying thank you. I think that's one of the things a leader can do. That's so simple. Just appreciation of when people really do have a bad time. Just acknowledging it, not accepting it as normal. That's something that I try to do.
Mm-hmm. Recognition is actually the number one reason why people are changing jobs in the tech industry. Not money. It's really not money, but everyone thinks it is. Nathan, last word?
I think just on the topic of recognizing people for going above and beyond, just be very careful about rewarding only the heroism. You do not want a hero culture, right? We also want to reward the people that helped us identify a near miss and didn't have to go above and beyond. It is important to recognize that as well, so that you aren't normalizing, hey, the way to get a bonus is to stay up all night fighting this fight. No, that's not how you get a bonus. So it's a delicate balance, because the thing is, we're working with people here, and we can't just feed code to people and expect them to do exactly what we want.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to share some from the audience as well. Somebody said you have to absolutely be better about not bringing up false positives, noisy, non-actionable alerts. Emma Irwin said something we're working at one of our sponsors, Fire Hydrant, is that immediate in post-alert severity declaration, only calling on the right people to come in, reducing the pain for SREs. Ed says we have a human buffer protecting us from this. 24-hour business experts monitoring services. Jason said they have scheduled video game time, although we have to remember for diversity, equity, inclusion, not everyone can do video games, but that does sound fun. Proactively monitor your people like you want to monitor your services. Someone else said, monitor people isn't my favorite word there. Proactively have one-on-ones, because often I've learned from Jessica Rose talking about burnout and a lot of other people talking about burnout, often outsiders can recognize it more than the person can in themselves at first. So I just want to say thank you all so much for joining this conversation. We're, of course, over and out of time. I do hope that the conversation continues. It's very active, and you all check out in our live event chat. And those that are watching this at home, share your own tips in the YouTube comments. Thank you all so much. And I'll hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.